Welcome to the Bringing Intimacy Back show, where intimacy is real. If you desire to intimately connect with yourself, significant other, children, family, friends, community, and higher power, then this is the show for you. We explore intimate topics, inspiring life stories, spirituality, and insightful tips on strengthening relationships. The show is hosted by Dr. April and her co-host, Coach K. Let's get this episode of the Bringing Intimacy Back show started. We share with you today the secret power to intimacy to create the life you love or love the life you create. Now here's your host, Dr. April, and her co-host, Coach K.
Welcome to the Bringing Intimacy Back show, where intimacy is real. How are you doing, Coach K?
I am doing amazing. And how about yourself?
I'm doing wonderful. You know, I know June is your birth month, and it's just such a wonderful time of the year with everything blossoming and just slowing it down for the summer.
Oh, yeah. It's like slowing down to heat up.
Exactly. And to talk about heat up, we have really if you know me, you know that I love a lot of spice.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a wonderful spicy topic today, which is Confessions of a Hollywood Sex Addict.
Yeah, I'm super excited about the topic, and I think so many people can benefit from this and learning. So yes, nice and steamy for the summer.
Yes. And as I was going to later on tell you about the guests, but as I was speaking to the guests, I was realizing we've never had this on the show before. And so I am very thankful and honored to have this space. Yes, because as you said, there are many people struggling with addiction. And sometimes people feel embarrassed about, the drug addiction and the alcohol addiction. But when it comes to sex, many people feel even just like, I can't even talk about it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And so I'm so happy we have this space. But before we get into that, as we know, every time we come on, we talk about once a month about a charity of the month. And the charity of the month is GSA Network, which is a great charity, which definitely highlights and helps people with the LGBTQ organization and empowers and provides safe schools and money to support them. So think about it, and it's www.gsanetwork.org. Yes.
And as we celebrate Pride in this beautiful Pride Month, that is an amazing charity to highlight for the LGBTQIA plus community. So very excited.
Yes, definitely. And thanks, Juan Riaz, for out there listening, and congratulations on us for talking about this topic that we're going to talk about. So we have someone who's very special. It's actually a person, his name is Dan Harary. And Dan Harary is actually a Hollywood publicist who's been in California for over, since the 80s?
Yeah.
Yes.
40 years.
Yes. And so as you guys know, I love 80s music, but being in Hollywood and with all of that and struggling with sex addiction, I guess, as he has, and now he's coming out to talk about all what's happened. I'm just really thankful for that. And not only he's talking about it, but he's also going to share with us his books that he's written about these different things. So definitely. Stay tuned.
It's going to be exciting.
And we will be back in a moment. Okay, bye.
Improving intimacy, everyday expressions is all about you and your partner. Opportunities for intimacy are scattered endlessly within every second of life you create together with your partner. Everyday expressions will educate you and open your eyes to just how great your relationship could be with a little TLC. Improving intimacy, everyday expressions provides a true baseline for the strength in your relationship you've been looking for. Available in Kindle, Audible, and paperback.
Welcome back to the Bringing Intimacy show, where intimacy is real. Welcome, Dan Harary. How are you doing?
Hi, Dr. April. Hi, Coach K. How are you?
Hey.
This is going to be interesting to say the least.
Yes. Yes. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. Yeah, definitely. And on this show, we really talk about intimacy. And so one of the things I really want to know is, when we talk about intimacy, what is your definition of intimacy?
Well, I've had intimacy really only with a few women in my life because of a number of reasons. But I've been with well over 100 women sexually over the years, but I've only been intimate with a few of them. And even those few, I have a very weird history with women, which is what I read about in my book, Carrot. Things tend to go wrong for me when I get close to a woman, either religious problems, financial problems, sexual incompatibility. When I was married, my mother-in-law and I didn't get along. I had a girlfriend who hated my son. I've dated women with cats, and I'm super, super allergic to cats. And boy, let me tell you, as much as I like the women and the sex with those women, I don't do cats. So intimacy is you're sharing every aspect of your whole self and your true self. And I'll be honest, and this is very sad, and it makes me sad to this day. I've only been intimate with a few women, and even then, I always kept part of myself secret. You know, my sex addiction was not known to my wife or the women, girlfriends I had that I was in love with. I kept it separate. Okay. It was a secret part of my life. So intimacy for me, to be honest, Dr. April, is something I would love to have it now. I turned 67 on Saturday. Saturday is my birthday.
Yes.
I haven't been with a woman in 4 years.
Okay.
I haven't been intimate with a woman since the year 2008. Okay. So intimacy to me is literally, and it's the title of my book, Carrot, like a carrot on a stick.
Right.
It's something that I've been chasing after, I think, my whole life.
Right. Dan, I'm curious, because as we're going to talk about your sex addiction, how was sex introduced to you?
That's a great question. And it's part of my sad story. I actually think it's part of my sad story. When I was 12 years old, I had a best friend, a male friend, and he and I used to steal his father's Playboy magazines. And we used to look at them up in my attic in my house. And I'm 12. This is 1968. And we're looking at these beautiful women with the big boobs and everything else. And my penis would get hard. And I didn't know, honest to God, and everything I'm going to tell you today is true. I didn't know what that was. I didn't know anything about it. In my era, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have sex talk in school. Okay. My parents never told me anything about sex ever. So I was in the dark. So we'd look at these Playboy magazines. I would get hard. He probably got hard too. And then one day, my friend who's 12, both 12, we go outside at my house in the driveway. My mother's car was there and it was unlocked. He goes, "Get in the car." I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Lay down on the back seat of the car." I said, "Why?" He goes, "I want you to be my girlfriend." I'm like, "What?"
Oh my gosh.
Like, what? What do you mean? He goes, "Just lay down and be my girlfriend." So I laid. Now he was 6 months older than me and more mature than me. Like he could probably grow a beard at the age of 12. One of those prematurely mature boys, you know. So I laid down and he got on top of me. Now we both had our clothes on, but he got on top of me and he put his arms around me and he humped me. His groin humped my groin. And I literally laying there thinking, what on earth is happening? You know, I still remember very vividly. And he's humping me. Well, I got hard and I came in my underwear and he came too. And then we got out of the car and he goes, "Thanks for the sex. I'll see you tomorrow." And he walked home. Now I'm 12. There's a big stain in my pants.
Right.
I knew Dr. April. I knew nothing. I knew no things about sex. I didn't know I thought I peed in my pants. Okay.
Mm.
I
Okay.
remember I went in the house. I hid the underwear. I hid it so my mother wouldn't see it. That was my introduction, and it was. And I'm not gay.
Right.
I've never been gay. If I was gay, it might have been an interesting entree. It might have been. But for me, as a non-gay person, it was confusing.
Mm-hmm.
From there, well, once I discovered a penis can get hard and stuff comes out, well, boy, then I started masturbating up a storm. When you discover your penis can do a magic trick like that,
Right.
So I started stealing Playboy magazines and jerking off whenever I could get away with it. Concurrently, my parents when I was born, my parents were quite young. So when I'm 12, 13, 14, jerking off in my bedroom to my magazines, my parents were having sex in the next room. And they were loud. My parents were loud. So as I'm jerking off to my magazines, and my parents are like, oh my God, I'm going to come in the next room. And my friend had just molested me. It was a very weird, to answer your question, my entree to sex and sexuality was very peculiar. My parents were very heightened sexual people. So I was in this universe of no knowledge, discovering myself. My friend made me come the first time I ever came. My parents are going at it in the next room. And so that was my entree, very, very peculiar.
That's a lot for a young person to take on, especially just not understanding.
I'll say, when I think back to that time, Kay, I'm like, God, I was so incredibly confused. Again, there's no internet. This is pre-AIDS, so no one talked about condoms or sex or anal sex. I used to, in my day, we had Gilligan's Island and I Dream of Jeannie, and we had these TV shows that had these beautiful, sexy girls. And my parents got me a TV in my room when I was 14. It was a gift. They got me a little black and white TV. And boy, if you're a masturbator in the 60s, and I Dream of Jeannie girl is on in her little outfit, boy, that's when you're going to go to town on yourself. So I learned about sex in a hidden, highly fantasized environment. Mm-hmm. And what happened to me, and this is also sad, is because of that, I was terrified of real girls. The girls at school terrified me. So my sexuality was hidden in my room late at night when everyone was asleep. And then the girls at school, who were the real life girls, I never had a date. I never had a date in high school. Not one date. I was terrified. So it was a disconnect. It was a disconnect that I went through early on for a variety of reasons.
And your parents still never talked to you about sex or relationships or?
When I was in my 40s, I said, Mom, how come you and Dad never told me about sex? And my mother goes, your father told me that he told you. And I said, Mom, he never told me. And then before my father died, I was probably in my 50s. I think I said, Dad, how come you never had a sex talk with me? And he said, I tried to talk to you once when you were about 10 or 11. And he goes, I turned bright red and I ran out of the house and I ran down the street.
Oh my gosh, wow.
So in retrospect, I think my dad did try to tell me some stuff. Mm-hmm. But
there was no language back then for them to know.
I needed
talk about it.
I needed a boy's penis gets hard and it feels good to masturbate, which means you pull on it back and forth and sperm comes out, and that's the white stuff that comes out when you think about pretty girls. If he had said those 3 sentences to me, I would have said, oh, because I thought I invented something. I did.
Oh, you thought you invented something?
I swear to God, I thought I invented masturbation. And the sperm, I didn't know what I didn't. I'm telling you the truth. And it's hard to believe. I didn't know what it was.
Okay.
I really didn't know what it was.
Right.
So
and
that
then
was.
Yeah,
But,
and then you went to a prestige college, correct?
okay, so that was my. Now there's something else I have to edit. I had clinical depression, undiagnosed,
Oh.
from the age of 15. Ready for this? Till the age of 40.
Mm.
I had clinical depression. I didn't have enough serotonin. I didn't know that until I turned 40.
Okay.
And we can get to that later. My mother had depression, her mother, her sister, my brothers, my nephew. Do you know what I mean? It ran in my family.
Right.
I didn't know I had it. So now I was molested by my friend, highly sexualized environment, no knowledge of sexuality. Add depression. Well, talk about fear of real girls.
Right.
And there were girls my whole life, childhood and teenage years, who really liked me. I had long hair. I played the drums. I was very popular, straight A student. I was in all the rock bands. Lots of girls were around. Girls liked me. And I'm like, oh, yeah, she's cool. Yeah, I really like her. She's a great friend. And then I'd go home and jerk off thinking about her boobs. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It was, I disconnected. I disconnected. It was a coping mechanism. But the depression was really definitely part of it for me.
Listening to your story. Oh, go ahead.
No. You go.
Listening to your story, it really reminds me. It's a movie that's out that's a little bit similar to you. I think it's called John Q or something. It's on Netflix, and he was pretty much saying, but he would get with girls and he would have sex with them, but he couldn't sleep unless he masturbated at night, and he was addicted to watching porn. So listening to you talk about that, it makes you just realize this is active in many homes everywhere. So I appreciate you speaking on it and telling this truth, because there's someone that needs to hear this so that they're able to speak more about their truth and to get to a place where you are now, where you've written books and you're able to openly talk about those things that happened to you, because they don't go away. You probably can visualize that moment when you were 12 just like it was happening yesterday.
Well, yeah, absolutely true. And today with the internet and look, sex is so blatantly out there now. When I was growing up, my friends and I, we stole Playboy magazines, stole them to look at boobs. Okay. Right now anyone could go on a computer and see hardcore anal sex on your computer. And see cum and everything flying. When I was in high school, a Playboy magazine was like gold. That was like, wow, this naked girls. In fact, this is funny. When I was in my 30s, I ended up working at the Playboy. I worked for Playboy. And that's part of my Hollywood stories. I worked for Hugh Hefner. I worked at Playboy. I knew all the girls. And I had just gotten married. So that was, talk about a disconnect there. I just gotten married. And now I'm literally working with the girls in Playboy magazine who I used to jerk off to, 20 years earlier. And now I knew them as friends. I would drive them and we would do topless photo shoots together. And I'd take them out for lunch. Mm-hmm. So that was very peculiar as well. Anyway, ask me more questions.
Okay. So I'm curious because you were jerking off, masturbating, very lonely, depressed. And then I'm assuming you went to college. When did you start to develop or start to have relationships? And then how did that,
Well, again, all through high school and all through college, I was a secret masturbator.
Okay.
My senior year of high school, there was a girl who really wanted to get with me. And this is one of the most painful moments of my entire life, looking back. She drove me home from a concert. I played drums. She drove me home. She goes, I really like you, and I like your long hair. And I said, oh, thanks. And now she was this beautiful girl with big boobs, right?
Right.
And she was literally waiting for me to kiss her, okay? She was in the car, right, waiting for me. And I was like thinking to myself, Cheryl's really nice. She's really pretty. but you know, she has really big boobs, and you know, there's no way she wants to be with me. I mean, I talk about self-esteem. Okay,
Right.
I had -2 self-esteem, -5. That's how much zero. I had zero self-esteem. So the next day, her best friend said, "You know, Dan, Cheryl really wanted to sleep with you." I go, "What?" I had no idea. But then instead she went back. She was so horny. She went back and got together with her old boyfriend. So that was my senior year of high school, which kills me to this day. Kills me to this day. College, my freshman year at college, there was a woman with long red hair who I used to stare at from afar, and I was madly in love with her from afar. And the whole school year, I never once spoke to her. I couldn't speak to her. In fact, she was the genesis for the theme of carrots.
Okay.
She used to look at me, I'd look at her, and I'd start shaking because I'm like, here's this girl that I would do anything to be with her, and I don't have the courage. I don't have the courage to even speak to her. I never even spoke to her the whole time. That's where the idea of carrots came in. That was the genesis of the idea. Finally, my senior year of college, now I'm 21 and a half. All my friends have been getting laid since they were 17. I'm 21 and a half. I'm still a virgin. I meet a girl New Year's Eve at a nightclub, very pretty blonde girl. I'm up in Boston. She was in Jersey. She used to fly up to see me. And we had unbelievable sex. I mean, this is true. The first night I ever had sex in my life, we had sex 9 times. 9 times.
Okay.
And the next morning she said, "Oh my God, I didn't know this was possible." I said, "Neither did I. I didn't know. This is my first girl." So once I had access to vagina, I took advantage of it. So that's when I became a sexual person with others. Now, we only were together a few months, and then she lived in a different state, and she once called me and said, "Danny, I'm so horny for you that I can't wait to see you." So I slept with Bill down the street. I said, "What?" And she broke my heart. I made her so horny, she broke my heart and cheated on me. That was my entree into relationships. For a time, I was in love with her. I mean, we only dated for 3 months. So I was in love with her, and then it ended as quickly as it began. She broke my heart, and that was it.
Okay. And you were faithful to her. And then when she broke your heart, then what happened next in your sexual journey?
I was stunned. I really was very, very hurt.
Okay.
So I was 21 and a half. My next sexual experience, and my sexual experiences in the early days were very, very peculiar and hit and miss. A year after college, I was living with friends. We had a rock band. We had a house near the beach in New Jersey. And I met a girl on the boardwalk, walking her dog, and I said, "Do you want to come home with me?" She said, "Okay." So she spent the night with me. And the next morning, and we had sex. The next morning, it turns out she was only 16. Okay, I was 23. And my friends saw her leave, and they said, "Dude, did you ever hear of jailbait?" And I go, "What's that?" I had no idea. They go, "Dude, you just banged a 16-year-old girl." I go, "Oh, shit." And then I realized if she told her parents, she lived around the corner.
Mm-hmm.
Her father could have come and killed me. So that was a one-night stand. Okay, that was my big sex of the year 1979, one time. Then we come to 1980. A friend of a friend hooked me up with a girl in Manhattan, New York City. We had a lot of sex. That was intimate and nice. Her parents were multimillionaires. She lived like a pig in a tiny little shitty little, I don't know if I can say that, in a crappy little apartment in New York. A lot of sex. And then
And at that time, what did sex mean to you at that time? The early 80s in Hollywood.
Well, no, I'm not there yet. This is actually the very beginning of 1980. I'm in New York still.
Oh, you're still in New York. Okay.
Before I came to LA. I would have sex sometimes and cry because I was so happy. I was so elated. Okay. Let's just jump forward for a bit. When I turned 40 and I was depressed, I went to a psychiatrist. I told him my story. He goes, "No wonder you masturbate and have sex." He goes, "You don't have any serotonin." He goes, "When you have an orgasm, your body makes serotonin." He goes, "I'm amazed you've accomplished so much in your life. He goes, of course you're a sex addict. You need orgasms because your brain doesn't make serotonin. So he gave me a prescription for Prozac, which again at 40
Right.
changed my life, completely and utterly changed my life. But before we get to that, so that's why anytime I had sex with a girl, I would cry, I would get emotional, I'd write poetry, you know, I was like the girl in the relationship, you know, not the stereotype gender role, but I was like the girl, I was the romantic one. The girl in New York, I didn't get her a Valentine's Day present. She got so pissed at me, she started yelling and screaming at me like an idiot. I didn't get her a Valentine's Day gift, so I never saw her again. And then I moved to LA later that year. What do you want to know next?
And so what I'm hearing also is that sex was a way for you in your mind that boosted your self-esteem, that not only in your mind, but actually in some aspect did.
Oh, sure. It made me feel, I mean, I guess all the years of my secretive masturbation, I felt like a kind of a freak, you know, and I never told my friend, I never told anyone. Okay. I didn't have a therapist. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell my brothers. I didn't tell my friends. I didn't tell my teachers. I didn't tell my school thing. So I lived in a secret sex world from the age of 12, right? Until I'm in my 20s. It was secretive. So when I had sex with a real woman, like the first time I had sex with this girl, Kim, and I came 9 times, it was like, thank you, God. Like I waited a long time for this. So when I had sex, it made me feel connected to another person. It made me very happy, of course, and joyous. And again, I wrote poetry for some of these girls. It made me feel like a semi-normal person. But Dr. April, I didn't have sex on a regular basis until I met my wife. You know, from 12 to 25. I met my wife when I was 20. From 12 to 25, I never had sex regularly with anyone. That's a lot of years to be alone sexually, you know.
Right. So earlier you said you felt like a freak because you were masturbating a lot. And then
not just the masturbation, it was masturbating in secret, you know.
Right.
Like I had roommates in college. I had roommates when I first came to LA. I'd have to like, okay, they're going to the store. I have an hour to jerk off. How am I going to jerk off? What am I going to look at? What magazine am I going to use? Am I going to, you know, I had sex with couches. I used to have sex with a couch, a leather couch. I'll tell you, it felt good. It felt really, really good. Okay. So I would have sex with inanimate objects. And so I had to like, and this later grew much worse during the sex addiction years. It's like, how am I going to come? When am I going to come? How am I going to come? I have to do it quickly because, you know, my parents or my roommates or my friends, they can't catch. I never got caught. It's amazing. I never got caught. So everything was secretive, highly secretive, and it was all in my own head. It's just all in my own head.
Right. Those sex addiction years, is that the time also you're with your wife?
Sex. Okay, so I met my wife when I was 25 in LA. Very pretty blonde. She just turned 20. So she was 20. I'm 25. We fell madly in love. We were together 11 years.
And can I get back to another quick question? I just want to know, how did you know what love was? I'm just kind of.
Our first date, I didn't have a car. When I met her, I was only here a year. I had no car. I just started a job. I had $6 in the bank. I literally had nothing. I had nothing.
Right.
Here's a pretty blonde who lived with her parents in a beautiful house in Santa Monica. She would pick me up in her car and drive me to dates. I didn't have a car. And Dr. April, the first date we ever had, she came to my house to pick me up. And I literally saw, it was like in a Disney movie. I literally saw stars. Like, I saw stars. I saw them with my eyes.
Yes, yeah.
Animated around her, because she was this beautiful blonde. I just saw stars. Right. And I'm like looking for Walt Disney. I was like, holy shit, and my heart's beating fast. How do I know? That's how I saw stars and my heart was beating fast. That's how I knew. That's how I knew. So we were together 11 years. everything went wrong, and it's very sad. She had a lot of major medical problems after we married. She developed Epstein-Barr syndrome. She was in bed from our honeymoon. She was in bed for 6 months. From the night of our honeymoon, I'm the only man on the planet who never got laid on his own honeymoon. I had no sex on my honeymoon, okay? From that night for 6 months, she was in bed, super sick with Epstein-Barr syndrome, which we don't know how she caught it. So the fact that relationship was built on infatuation and love. It was not built on sex. We had sex. I have 2 kids. I'm very grateful for my 2 children.
Right.
But we were not super sexual people.
Mm-hmm.
I had to jerk off in the closet, you know, or when she was at the store. This is the era when phone sex started.
Right.
When phone sex started, I'll tell you exactly, because I was one of the pioneers. In 1983, I was working at Playboy, and someone told me about phone sex. And some guy told me, he goes, you know, my wife does phone sex. And I said to him, I go, what, does she put the phone up her ass? I swear to you, I didn't know what that was. I had no idea. I swear to God. She goes, no, my wife talks to men on the phone while they masturbate, and she masturbates, and she charges them money. Now, my wife and I broke up for about 6 months. We had a separation. For 5 months, we had a separation. So during that time, I discovered phone sex. Well, boy, I was the king. I was the king of that. And I'll tell you why. It's my every fantasy come true. You don't know what the girl looks like on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, now they have video cams, so
right.
It's different. But on a phone, you know, it could look like you know, it could look like my grandmother. But hi, how are you? And you know, so you imagine a beautiful girl, and she tells you what she's doing, and she tells you, what are you doing? What do you look like? What do you want me to do for you? And plus, I'd have all my magazines laid out on the bed. So I'm looking at the magazines, and I'm talking to girls, and I'm masturbating. And I'm thinking, this is the greatest invention ever. It's sex with a live woman, okay? It's one step removed from me at the age of 12 alone in my bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
It's sex with a live woman. And you pay I think it was like, in those days, like $1 a minute. Now it's like $5 a minute or something. So I loved phone sex. But anyway, getting back to my wife, we did 11 years. We had 2 kids, every problem imaginable: money, religion, health, sexual incompatibility. At the end, she didn't want to have sex with me anymore at all.
Because sometimes, I don't know, just in talking with other addicts, that when they watch so much porn and stuff, that they do sex so fast that they're not really focusing on the person that they're actually having sex with, such as the wife. Did that, you know what I mean? It's like that person's like an object.
That's a good point. And I'll tell you the truth. That's true for me now in my older age.
Okay.
Like when I masturbate now, I'll come in 30 seconds. It's just because it feels so good and it happens so quickly. But when I was in my 20s, 30s, 40s, I was the king of sex. I mean, I could last a long time. I had control over my orgasms then. Mm-hmm. And I could come, and this is not to be graphic, but I could come many, many times.
Okay.
Because I was so, in my mind, the sex was so valuable to me that when I had sex, I could come many times and I could last a long time.
Okay. And were you focused on the women also, in the sense of your wife? Were you able to, you know, be there, that intimacy?
We had, I'd say, maybe the first 5 years, yes.
Okay.
It was loving. She was very sick a lot of that time, but we had loving, romantic, sweet sex, okay?
Right.
But then what I discovered for me personally was I liked almost, that's when I started to watch porn alone, and I'd say, you know, I liked porn sex.
Okay.
Can we say the F word on this podcast?
Yeah, so far, yeah, that's fine, yeah.
You sure you can say the F word?
Well, you already just say the F word.
I'll just say F word. Right. So with my wife, again, sweet, loving, kind, warm, you know, hug me, kiss me, make love to me. Okay, right? I liked effing.
Right.
I would do that with my wife. And then if she went to the store, I would have phone sex, or I'd go in the garage and masturbate, because I needed like hard, like powerful, like almost angry.
That's
I'll
to
use
say,
that
like the
word.
aggression around it. You needed that.
When I was sexual, I became angry. It was almost like, I'll show you, I'll show you women of the world who rejected me all through high school, right? Even though I rejected them. Anyway, so now I'm 36. My wife and I broke up. I'm 36. We had a divorce. We both cried for a little while, but it was mutual. She said to me, she goes, look, we're not in love. She said to me, Dan, you need to have sex with other women. She told me that. She goes, you didn't have a lot of sex before you met me. She goes, you need to have sex. I go, Kim, thank you. And I started crying. I literally cried, and I hugged her. I said, thank you. Thank you for giving me a divorce. Thank you. Crying, tears of joy, because now I could go be sexual. Like to have the angry sex that's what I wanted. And we have 2 kids and all that. So she moved out. So now I'm 36. Well, now I'm like, okay, now where do I start? I've been with her for 11 years. I never cheated on her, right?
Mm-hmm.
So where do I start? So in those days, this is 1992. There's no internet. The LA Times, where I live, newspaper, once a week they had a full page called Personals. The Personals.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And you could put this is in print, in the newspaper in print. It's so archaic now, but I put an ad. I put single white male, 36, funny, witty, and warm, seeking sexy girlfriend for fun times. Something. I got so many, and in those days they called you on the phone to respond. I got probably 50 calls from that ad. So I dated from that ad for years. And long story short, fat, thin, black, white, Asian, Hispanic. I tried to sleep with whoever came along. You know what I mean? There were women I didn't even like, quite a few that I didn't even like, but I just needed to get F. I needed to F. And whoever came along that said yes, I was going to go for that. Concurrently, here's the sex addiction. Concurrently with real women, right? I was hiring call girls and prostitutes to come to my house. Or if I was out of town for business, when I went out of town, I always had a call girl come to my hotel room. So now, right? Now these women are not free. So now I'm spending money. So I'm dating real women and going out to nice restaurants. That's money. I'm hiring hookers. That's money. I'm supporting my ex-wife and 2 kids. That's money. And I'm running my own apartment and my own house and my own car. And that's money.
Yeah, did you have any other addictions?
That's a really great question. Along the way of my sex addiction, so from 36 to 56, after my divorce, 20 years exactly, I was a raging sex addict. Okay.
Yeah.
Like I just said, real women, real women one night stands, girlfriends that I had feelings for, and call girls. And I also would get lap dances. I would do phone sex. Do you know what a peep show is? You heard of peep shows?
Mm-hmm.
In LA at the time, they had peep shows. You put money in a thing and the slot goes up and you masturbate while a live girl watches you. Then there were other places that had live girls in the room masturbate with you while you masturbate for them, and there's no glass. And these girls were like Victoria's Secret models. So boy, was I addicted to that. That was fantastic. That was a lot of money, but boy, that was an incredible experience. So I was doing all these things concurrently. I forget your question.
Have you had any other addictions?
Oh, okay. So along the way, Dr. April, I became, when I was doing these things, I needed to be drunk. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So that's where, so vodka, that's when I discovered vodka.
Okay.
So I would, I'm going to have a call girl come tonight. Okay. Vodka. Had to have a couple drinks before the woman came to my house, took the edge off of the guilt of the fact that I'm about to spend $400 on a girl when my son needs a bicycle, right? You know what I mean? It's like, boy. So that, and then later it would be vodka plus Viagra. There was no way I would do anything sexual without being drunk on vodka and one or two Viagra. And then I'd be in this heightened state, and I became like a porn star. I had sex with women at my house. They would say, "Where have you been hiding? You're fantastic." I was like my own little porn star in my own little world.
When did the guilt come in?
I'll be honest, I didn't really have that much guilt. I really didn't.
Okay, you mentioned it.
I really didn't, and I'm going to be honest, I really didn't have much guilt, but along that way, when I was 40, I started my own business as well.
Okay.
And I went from 85,000 a year to $500,000 a year overnight when I started my own, $500,000 a year.
Wow.
So I was very successful for a very long time, made a lot of money. So when I'm making a lot of money, I could support my wife and kids.
Mm-hmm.
I could date real girls, and I could spend whatever I wanted on my fantasy life. And it was like a 3-ring circus. I did whatever I could do. It all came crashing down in 2008. One of your questions to me was, when did I hit rock bottom? Well,
right.
In 2008, my daughter went to college. And I was still making really good money, and I was having, I remember one month I spent $12,000 in 1 month on call girls. 3 girls a week, $1,000 a night, $12,000, right? In December 2008, everything changed. Barack Obama had just been elected, but he wasn't installed as president yet. There was a major recession.
Mm-hmm.
And in December 2008, I lost 2/3 of my clients overnight. My income dropped to literally 1/3 overnight, and my daughter had just started college. Okay, I'm living in Beverly Hills. I have a Mercedes. I have wining and dining women, the most expensive. I'm spending money like I have money, and then it changed like this. And now I'm like, do I send my daughter money in college, or do I have sex with whores? Well, gotta support my daughter in college. Bye-bye whores. So in 2008, man, I had to reinvent my sex addiction. And a couple of years later, I found a sex therapist. I mentioned once to my sister-in-law. She said, "How's your sex life?" I said, "Well, I spend a lot of money on whores." She goes, "Dan," she goes, "you need a sex therapist." I go, "Why?" She goes, "No, promise me you'll go see a sex therapist." I said, "Okay." This is in 2009, it was.
Mm-hmm.
I went to a sex therapist, and I told her all these stories I'm telling you, Dr. April and Kay, and I swear to God, I just was telling her how much money I was spending and the masturbation, and when I was 12 with my friend, all this. And this lady leaned forward, she goes, "So you're a raging sex addict, aren't you, Dan?" And I looked at her and I said, "Really?" And this is a true story. I said, "Really?" And she goes, "Don't you know you're a sex addict?" Now, in 2008, 2009, I don't think I even had ever heard that term.
Right.
Right? This is 2008, this is 2009. This is definitely 2009. I'm like, wow. And she goes, "You're not alone. There's a lot of people in the world, men and women." I go, "Really? There's such a thing?" Isn't that funny? I was like a unicorn who didn't know that there were other unicorns in the world. I thought I was the only unicorn of my kind. She goes, "Yeah." She goes, she goes, "Promise me you will join Sex Addicts Anonymous." That's amazing.
Right.
I said, how am I going to tell my stories in front of other people? She goes, "You have to swear to me, to God, you're going to go, because you have to go. You have to see you're not the only one." So in 2009, I started to go to SAA meetings in LA, here in LA. It was probably 25 men, and there was one African-American woman in there. And I was so impressed with her that she had the balls to be in that room. Imagine you're the only woman in a whole room of horny men, and you're the only woman. And she showed up every week, this woman, forget her name. So I didn't know anything. I sat way in the back, and these guys are talking about losing their jobs, losing their homes, getting arrested, getting syphilis, losing visitation with their children, jerking off at work and having their boss catch them. One guy was jerking off in a tree, looking at his neighbor. He got arrested. He got arrested jerking off in a tree. How do you explain that to your family?
Yeah.
I mean, that's embarrassing.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys, I'm sitting there and I'm like, holy ass, I can't even believe what I am hearing right now. These are the most amazing stories. One guy said, I hate myself so much. I go down to Skid Row and I pick up homeless women and I have sex with them in my car without protection because I hope I get AIDS so I can die because I hate my life. Well, I'm like, oh my God. So I'm hearing all this. And then they go, okay, are there any new members in the room? And I put my hand up. And they said, what's your name? My name's Dan. And they, do you want to share? You know this. You know, the same with Alcoholics Anonymous or the other.
Right.
Do you want to share? And my heart's beating. And I'm like, how am I going to talk about all the things I just told you to in 3 minutes in front of 25 men? How? You know, I've never talked about sex in front of men before. That's another thing. Until that day, I never spoke about sex with a man in my life, not even my best friends. It just wasn't done. So I'm like, well, you know, I was 12 and my friend and my parents and jerking off, and marriage went wrong and sex addiction. And at the end of that share, men came up to me and hugged me. And they said, Dan, that was probably the most amazing share we've ever heard. I go, really? And people were hugging me. And they go, please keep coming back. Please keep going. So I went for years. To this group to share.
Right.
And you guys, I swear to God, the first night I shared and I drove home, I cried. I was crying. Because I'm like, I felt like this incredible weight was lifted. I'm like, wow, I've embraced my sex addiction. I'm not embarrassed or ashamed. I'm really not embarrassed or ashamed. I'm really not. I never really had guilt.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly couldn't afford to keep my hobby going because I had a child in college. And that really was the turning point. It was daughter or horse. I'm going to pick my daughter every time.
Right.
That's good.
So SAA, no, I don't go anymore because it was the same guys with the same stories and the same problems. And you always knew Bill was going to talk about his house. Mm-hmm. And it just got routine. So I stopped going. But do you remember, I don't know, I'm older than you. Years ago on TV, there was a show called Scared Straight. Do you remember that?
Yes.
They took teenagers into prisons
right.
to scare them so they wouldn't become criminals, right?
Right.
For me, SAA was like my Scared Straight. I'm like, these guys are getting arrested, going to jail, losing their jobs, living in their cars, can't see their kids. I make tons of money. I live in Beverly Hills. I have beautiful children. I have millions of friends. Mm-hmm. My thing is just, I got to control the spending on my addiction. I'm not at their level. They're much sadder cases than me. But I had so much empathy for them that I'm like, you know what, Dan, you really need to calm this whole thing down. You just got to, from a 12, turn it down to a 2. You just got to turn it down. So since literally from the age 36 to 56, it was exactly 20 years. I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, which I wish I had now. And now I turned 67 in 2 days. So it's been 11 years.
Okay.
And I've calmed it down. Now I still do some things. But I've calmed it much down than it used to be.
So Sex Addiction Anonymous really helped you.
That's my advice for others. 2 things. If you can afford it, find a sex therapist, like the 2 of you,
right?
Someone who understands. You know, when you tell someone you're a sex addict, like some of my male friends, what I told them, They go, boy, I wish I was a sex addict. You must be getting laid left and right. Okay, there's a lot of excitement in the sex part, but there's ramifications of it too. It's not happy-go-lucky, you know. So I forgot what I was saying.
You were giving tips. You started off.
So find a therapist who understands sex addiction, because and honestly, I've had other therapists over the years, and when I told them that sex, they said to me, Dan, they go, you know, I don't think I'm a good fit for you. I didn't study sex addiction.
Right.
You need someone. The first therapist I ever had in my life, right when I got divorced, was an older woman, and I told her my sexual stuff, and she turned bright red. She turned red,
Mm-hmm.
and looked away. My information was too intimate for her,
Right.
and I'm like, well, I can't talk to my grandmother about my jerking off. I got to find someone who's. I've always had women therapists. I've always found women sex therapists. I've always found that fascinating, that people like you, you know, young, attractive women are open-minded and not revolted or disgusted by someone like me. You know what I mean? So find a good sex therapist, someone who you feel a rapport. You can tell them any secret. That's a key. Any secret has to come out. When I spilled my secrets, it was the weight lift coming off. When you live with secrets in this area, it's a burden. It's a burden.
Right.
And then find an SAA group. During COVID, they were online, you know, but I'm sure that they have them in person. Find every state has an SAA group. Try to go to either online or in person. My brother is a sex addict. He does it on the phone.
Okay.
He lives in California, but he used to live in Canada. And once a week, he has a meeting on the phone with his sex people in Canada.
Right.
Because it helps him. It helps keep him grounded. So those two things, therapist, SAA.
Was there anything that you lost in your sex addiction that you never got back?
This is a dopey answer, but hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Okay.
Literally.
Okay.
Really. Now, I don't make what I used to make now.
Right.
Since COVID, I don't make $500,000 a year. I made $500,000 a year for like 20 years in a row or something. Money, a great deal of money. And it's funny, but it's not. I'm looking at retirement, right? I'll be retiring in a few years. Well, if I had that money in the bank now, boy, my retirement would be a whole lot more secure. But I was busy chasing after, and I chased after the most beautiful girls, because I'm in Hollywood. You know, I met actresses, models, and singers. I always chased after the prettiest girl in the room, even though I'm not George Clooney or anything. I didn't always sleep with them. I slept with some, but not with many. But I always was chasing them, because to me, my imprint with women and sex was Playboy magazine.
Okay.
A beautiful blonde California girl with the big boobs and the blonde hair and the blue eyes. That to me, in my mind, was you have sex with that. So that was my how I trained my psyche.
Mm-hmm.
That was my ideal sex partner.
So if people out there listening and they want to know more about your story.
My whole story is in my book, Carrots, right here. Isn't that a great graphic, you guys?
I like that.
Yes, I love that.
That's been in my head for years. That's me, apparently, and this is every girl I ever chased after.
Yes.
Carrots, True Confessions of a Hollywood Sex Addict. It's my entire story, no holds barred, all my secrets. My mother is 88, God bless her. She's in a wheelchair. When can I read Carrots? I said, Mom, after you die and you go to heaven, ask God if you can read Carrots. I go, if you read it now, it'll kill you. I said, I don't want you to die. So if you read it now, it'll kill you. So don't read my book. Do not. And my daughter also. My daughter and my mother are not allowed to read that.
Yes, but if you're out there and you're listening and you just heard this story and you're struggling with sex addiction, Carrots is a great book for you to start to read.
It's on Amazon, hardcover and softcover. I have pictures of me with many of the women I've loved and lost or chased after. Some of those women, if they knew they were in my book, I think they'd probably sue me. So
Yes.
we'll keep it quiet.
All right. Thank you so much. And if you're wanting to reach out to him, his website is danhararyauthor.com. Thank
right.
you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Your
Thank
story.
you. This is great. If you want to do part 2, I mean it, because there's other things I never told anyone, and I would consider sharing with you.
Okay, definitely. Yes, we're going to talk after the show. Yes, but
That'd be awesome.
Very cool. Thank you, guys. This was
All
really
right.
great. It meant a lot to me. It was very uplifting. Thank you.
Okay, yes, thank you. We'll be back in a moment.
Are you wanting a vacation in paradise? Vacation to reignite the passion, the desire in your relationship? Vacation counseling is just for you. We are deeply committed to your success as a couple. Our couples counseling retreats are exclusive, effective, and intimate. At Vacation Counseling, you will benefit from a combination of couples counseling, intimacy counseling, and individual counseling while you and your partner enjoy a relaxing vacation in sunny Southwest Florida. If you are interested in vacation counseling, please visit us at vacationcounseling.com for more information on prices and packages.
Welcome back to the Brilliant Intimacy Show, where intimacy is real.
That was a very good show, and I know helpful for someone.
Yes. And I'm just honored that he shared so much and the struggles.
Absolutely. And I enjoyed hearing the story and knowing that because, he did share that there are so many people that lose a lot. Families, jobs, their freedom, going to jail. So it's good that he was able to get to that place of, I lost money, but, he still has his family, he still has his self, he still has his freedom. So that's awesome. And he's able to write the book to share that information for someone who may be secretly struggling. There are a lot of little boys and men that are in a quiet room hiding in shame somewhere that needed to hear this. So this was awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And then I think there's also on the flip side, a lot of women.
Yes. When you spoke about the one woman that was absolutely, yes.
Who are either married to it or even they struggle themselves, 2 aspects. Yes. Yeah. And so for those who are married and they hear this and they sometimes think it's, it's about them, but really it's their partner's struggle. Yes. And as a woman, it's, because women can be addicts too.
Yep.
And the other aspect that I should have, it's also about how he was depressed.
Yeah.
So we're definitely going to have him back as a guest. So yes, if you can share also what the upcoming guests are.
Absolutely. We have some amazing shows coming up to round out this month of June. On June 22nd, we have Healthy Intimacy After Trauma with Bria Young. On June 29th, we have Going the Wrong Way with Chris Donaldson. And then on July the 6th, we have Sex Doesn't Start in the Bedroom with Gary Blase. But before we go to some of these reminders, we just saw an awesome commercial for your retreats. And you have a special thing for your listeners when it comes to the retreats. If you want to share that so that everyone knows how they can get some come to a retreat and save some money.
Yes, definitely. Actually, I have 2 special things. So so if you're thinking about retreat and you just email me, you get a discount code of $500 off on a retreat. And then the other thing that I want to say, on the Bringing Intimacy Back website, we now have a quiz that you can take if you're thinking, struggling with intimacy and even just about self. That you go online and you take it, and it'll provide some information and resources. So definitely check us out on the bringingintimacyback.com website. Thank you guys so much. And please, if you like us, just let us know on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And we'll see you guys next week. Take care. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Bringing Intimacy Back, where intimacy is real. You can also find us at bringingintimacyback.com, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Dr. April Brown's 7-book series, Improving Intimacy, is now on Amazon. We'll see you next Thursday at 3:30 p.m. Don't forget to follow, share, and subscribe.